So today let's talk about restraint with horses. Restraint, ultimately, there's lots of ways that you can restrain a horse. The most typical way, baby girl, is through pressure on their head. The simplest is in the form of the halter. Why would we restrain a horse? We restrain a horse most often in order to provide them a certain type of care, usually for their health and safety, our health and safety. While it is possible to not have to restrain a horse, you can train them to do a lot of things like standing for the farrier or a number of other things through operant conditioning. That really only works under set conditions, right? So say you are in an emergency situation, there's a hurricane, a wildfire, something like that that is causing your animal an awful lot of stress. It's not ideal conditions and you have to evacuate. Your horse might be well versed with loading on the trailer, but under those situations or those conditions, they might suddenly not want to load, They might decide that they vastly prefer the safety of their own barn versus getting in that trailer and evacuating. So your horse has to learn to yield to restraint, right? So yielding to restraint is learning to give to pressure. Pressure comes in a lot of different forms. And when we're talking about pressure, whether it's the pressure from a restraint or pressure from spur, mental pressure, physical pressure, but specifically physical pressure, we talk about surface area. So the greater the surface area, so like my whole hand pressing against a horse, very mild versus, say, my finger pressing against a horse. I've upped the degree of severity. Now she's got a little expression because I'm poking her. Now I'm going to go to just the tip of my finger. So this is pretty severe, right? Now she's going to pin her ears even more. She's like, nope, don't like that. So hand, didn't get her to move much. I've already poked her, so she's like, that was so unfair, but not a big response, right? I'm going to go to flat finger. Ear went back a little bit further. Now I'm going to go to fingertip, and we get the side eye. So when you're talking about restraint, you're very much going to discuss surface area. So the bigger something is, right, the bigger, flatter something is, the more surface area that is coming in contact with the horse, the milder it is. That's your spurs, that's your chains, that's your ropes. That's what to keep in mind when we're talking about severity with anything that we're using in a horse, anything that comes in contact with the horse. So more surface area, the milder it is. Less surface area, the more severe it is. First up, plain halter. Comes in leather, can be nylon, can be biothane, can be all sorts of materials. Very wide, very gentle, mild pressure. We have a rope halter. This is pretty standard. Obviously, you see the diameter of the pressure being applied is smaller. So therefore, this is going to have a bit more bite than your standard halter. And then on top of that, you can add various things to it to create less surface area in which it is applying that pressure, thereby making it harsher. We can add knots like this guy right here, twists. All of those things increase the severity. And by severity, I'm going to say the word severity. Saying severity does not mean it is severe. It just increases the dynamic amount of the pressure that is being applied, okay? So we're talking, let's move on to the next, which is chains, ropes. You can add this, which is a custom made out of a pigging string. You can have a stud chain. They also can come in leather, which is ideal. Flat leather versus rolled leather. Again, surface area really does influence how severe a pressure is. Then we have what is a nose twitch. This can also come with a rope top, a chain top. Sometimes you can find leather. It's really uncommon. Plain metal, quote unquote, humane twitch. Twitches are my least favorite. I would rather go with like these two, which could go over their nose or be used as a lip chain. And I prefer that because the more high strung an animal is, the more likely they're going to respond better to a lip chain than they are to, say, a nose twitch. That is because applying pressure to the gums in a very static sort of motion is also a way of relieving anxiety with some horses. So if you are conscientious about applying the pressure with a lip chain, especially like something like this or a leather one where it's a pretty flat, very benign kind of pressure, then actually you are causing your horse to have a sort of mistaken feel-good response to it. So that's why it works better with your high flight type horses, your really high thoroughbred concentrations. Lip chains work way better than a twitch. I showed you a variety of halters progressing in order of severity, and then we moved on to the various types of shanks. The one thing I don't have on hand is a leather one to show you. It would be nice. My second most favorite is the pigging string, custom made, and I'll show you the different ways that we can apply this. You can do the same with a chain. Obviously this is much more mild. There's a lot more surface area in contact with the horse, but the texture of it does give it a little bit of bite. So does its flexibility or lack thereof. If this was a softer lie of rope, right, so it would flex more, it would be much more mild. This is a pretty stiff chunk of rope, therefore it's got a bit of bite. So when I have one that might be a little numb, really like using this. It doesn't go overboard, but it gets their attention. Method number one, we've hooked this to the side of the halter, run it down the cheek, over the nose, through the other side, and hooked our lead rope to it. This is pretty mild. You know, you're not going to pull the halter off kilter. You're not going to pull it really into their eye because it runs up their cheek. All this extra slack over here, though, come on, babe, let's let them see. I would sometimes run this through this lower ring on the halter, simply to take all this extra play out, so I had a little bit more control. See how you can throw a lot of slack back in there when they give and do what it is you want them to do, right? Release, pressure, release, pressure, just that easy. So that's number one. Number two method, you see it wraps all the way around their nose, down through the halter ring, attaches to the lead rope. This gives me a lot of guide with their nose. I can influence the elevation of their head. This is great if I'm working them at a distance and maybe they're really fresh, they're a little wild, they're coming off a stall rest. I need to keep all 4 feet on the ground so they don't hurt themselves. This gives me a lot of extra control, not a ton of slack to get hung up in. Also, I can be on either side and have equal control. Like this is a good, no matter which direction your horse is facing, kind of method to use, right? So you don't necessarily have to be standing on their left side. You can be standing on their right side. You still have the same type of control, same very clear pressure on your horse. And as you can see, it's still fairly mild. Like she's okay with pushing through it, right? It's not going to over tighten because of the way the halter works. Plus this kind of takes a little bit of the burden of the sharpness of this. Method number three, you'll see this a lot on the racetracks. You'll much more often see it with a chain, but hooked to the left side of the halter, back in the throat latch area, run under and across their chin, across the nerve endings there, over this side, through the nose, across the nose, back out the left, attach the lead. This is only good for leading on the left side, really good for horses that want to get a little fractious, maybe want a rear buck play kick, and for whatever reason they're not supposed to be, you know, maybe they're healing from a soft tissue injury or, you know, whatever reason you need to keep them on the ground. This is always a good method. It can give you a lot of control in a very spread out kind of way, right? So you're gonna hit those nerve endings. A rope like this is gonna give slack immediately as soon as they respond to it. excellent training tool as well. Now we're going to move into things that really should only be left in the hands of professionals. I'm going to cover them here because honestly, it's good for your average horse owner to at least know how to properly apply these things in case of an emergency. But that's also why we're skipping items like chiffony bits and hobbles and those sorts of things, because honestly, that's going to be more of a danger to your averagely educated backyard horse owner. So if you're in a real bad emergency and you absolutely need to get your horse to hold still, maybe, you've got a massive injury that needs to be stitched up, and for whatever reason, too much sedation's counterindicated. So you also, or maybe your horse is fighting off sedation, who knows? Anyway, you've got to get that horse to hold still for whatever reason. Maybe it's just to apply some triage to get your horse to stop bleeding. And they're so upset that it is too dangerous for you to apply pressure wherever, usually a leg. A lip chain can come in very handy in those situations. I prefer a narrow diameter rope, a flat piece of leather, rolled leather, none of which I have. As far as the leather goes, I do have the stiff rope here. Most commonly, you'll see it done with a stud chain. What happens, and I'm not going to really go all the way, maybe all the way in depth, but you take the slack. It's got to be enough that you can get out past your horse's nose. You're going to flip your horse's lip up, and in that groove where the lip meets the gum, you're going to lay that chain across there. Then you will pull it tight, okay? And it's important to keep this down forward pressure to kind of lock it in place. Sometimes, they're called lip chains, gum chains. That sort of restraint, once your horse's endorphins start to release, will keep your animal still for you. They respond very well to this. This seems unconscionably mean, and a lot of people think it is, but I want you to consider something. We're going to remove this, right? You may have seen this before, but one of the best ways to release your horse's anxiety is to take your hand like this. She wants no part of me at the moment. Take your hand like that, spread it out, and just press in here and let your horse press back, right? Oh, then they press and they get a good nice release in, and they relax. See, look, now she's like, oh, that was not bad. I liked that. So I want you to consider that pressure point is dual use, right? So it's all in how you use it, how aggressive you are, how mindful you are. So if you are smart, you are mindful, you are thoughtful, you're not doing your horse any harm. You could be doing them a lot of good. You could be performing that first aid on that gaping wound. You could be saving your horse's life. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk on restraint.